Hey everybody, Dr. Colleen Sierra here again from Sierra Center for Behavioral Health, coming at you again to talk about mental health awareness. And today, instead of boring you with a lot of statistics about how many of us struggle with mental health issues, what I really want to focus on is about the thing that unknowingly has really defined my career and my life. It's been so transformative for me, and that's learning about little t trauma and the ACE study. So the ACE study was conducted by the Center for Disease Control, CDC, and Kaiser Permanente in 1995, and it spanned 2 years worth of research, and they surveyed over 17,000 people. So for you researchers and scientist people out there, I don't have to tell you what a robust sample size that was. And it wasn't super diverse in terms of demographics. It was mostly Caucasian middle class adults, which is important for you to know, and is still super relevant. But in any case, so what they found is they found a bunch of things. One of the cool things they found is that the connection between adverse childhood experiences and how that can predict chronic medical issues is staggering. I mean, it's really unbelievable. But that's for a different day. The really interesting thing to me, and the point of this conversation today, is the fact that they found that 2/3 of the people surveyed about adverse childhood experiences, 2/3 reported that they had at least one adverse childhood experience. 2/3 of the people surveyed. And out of those 2/3, 87% had more than one. I mean, it's a lot. That is a lot of adversity. So what are they asking about, right? So let's get into that. What constitutes as adverse childhood experiences? Well, some of the things that I'm sure you would think about, right? Abuse, physical, emotional, verbal, sexual. Yeah, we do a pretty good job at labeling those things trauma. Neglect was on there as well. Physical, we mostly talk about. Emotional, we don't talk about almost at all, but emotional and physical neglect were on there. All right, predictable. Here's where it gets interesting. The other thing that they surveyed were household challenges. What's a household challenge, you say? Let me tell you. Witnessing domestic violence, which is not just in the way that we think about it, which is typically dad to mom, but violence within the household. So violence to a parent, violence to a sibling. If you witnessed any of that, that is a household challenge. Feeling that no one loved you, heard you, or thought you were special. Feeling that your family didn't look out for one another, didn't care for one another, didn't support one another. That's more of that like emotional neglect that we talked about. Parental separation and divorce. It's hugely stressful for everybody, and especially for kids. Living with somebody who had a substance abuse issue, living with somebody who struggled with mental illness and suicide. Losing a loved one to prison. Well, in the ACE, they say prison. It's now more thought of as losing a loved one to death, to incarceration, to deportation. Losing a loved one is also incredibly stressful. So this is interesting, right? With this new definition, new 1995, but whatever. With this expanded definition, how many of you now identify as someone who's experienced childhood adversity? Right? Okay. Take me, for example. You might look at me and think, oh, I've got my ducks in a row and I've got my shit together. I have an ACE score of 4. If we take the last ACE question, how many of you have lost a loved one to prison, and we go more from the more modern take on it, which is losing a loved one, I now have an ACE score of 5. There are only 10 questions on the ACE. I have 4 or 5, depending on who you talk to. And this is where it gets really interesting. People who have an ACE score of 4, the likelihood of chronic pulmonary lung disease increases by 390%. Hepatitis, 240%. Depression, 460%. Suicide, 1,220% increase in my risk for suicide. I mean, it's profound. And the ACE didn't even take into account all of these things I think should be in there. Like, what about people who grow up in violent and dangerous neighborhoods and worried every day that they could get shot? What about those folks? What about folks who experience racism, homophobia, sexism, and all of the microaggressions that come with those things on the daily? What about those folks? If we include those experiences into this broader definition of childhood adversity, chronic stress, and trauma, does your ACE score go up? Mine certainly does. So here's the takeaway. A ton of us have experienced childhood adversity, chronic stress, and trauma, and that has a huge impact on our physical and mental well-being as adults. Whether we recognize it or not, it has a major, very well documented on our well-being as adults. And that is worth knowing, thinking about, and doing something about. So, hope this has been helpful. Thanks for listening.